when it comes to studying ancient samples from like the Bronze Age, other than like archaeological evidence of like whether those peoples were of a Phoenician culture, Israelite culture, or any of the other Levantine groups, is there any genetic piece of evidence that can potentially distinguish these Bronze Age peoples from one another? Because as far as I understand it, they're extremely close genetically.
That's a great question, Omar. Now, I have to say that I'm very inexpert in the study of ancient DNA. So all my work over the years has been contemporary DNA taken from living, breathing individuals today. And the entire field of studying ancient DNA has undergone a revolution and breakthrough because of technological advances of deep sequencing. Svante Pabo, of course, and David Reich and others, whose I can't mention all their names, and shed light. So taking that technology and applying it to what you have pointed out, that is these various sites, and actually, I will try this share screen for a second. This is, if this works, we'll see in a minute. Not sure it'll work. So well, let's just skip it then, so as not to trouble the listening audience. So I'm off the share screen, I think. And basically we have, sites, of course, from what is currently in Israel, Chatzor. It was also called Chatzor for a long time. I'm sure Tzvi Misinai knows much more about the history, and many of you do. Yehud, areas in Amman, around Jerusalem, areas in Lebanon, Sidon, and others, multiple sites of what were the Canaanite city-states. And the relationship between the genetics and the culture, or the naming of a site, is quite correct, Omar, is inferential, not direct. It's inferred by archaeologists who do carbon dating along with other technologies, look at the nature of the pottery, the nature of the material, then look at the petrous bone or the skeletal remain nearby and say, oh, this must come from there, draw an inference, and then say this was this following Canaanite city-state, and this was that. And you're quite right, and this was one of the big findings of the cell paper, was as opposed to what really no one knew or no one was sure about, these Canaanite city-states, the inhabitants thereof, the small number that have been sampled, were quite related to each other. In other words, they were city-states, but they were actually quite related to each other. Not so surprising, there was a population that was mixing and moving in this tiny, small part of the world, relatively speaking. And you're quite right that there were a few pockets of other populations, let's say coming from the Eastern Mediterranean, whether they be Phoenician, Philistine, from Greece, etc., also introducing their DNA. Humans love to move and to mate. And when they move, they bring their DNA. When they mate, they leave their DNA and their descendants. And that's what we can see. And these were people, and then they developed cultures, they adopted religions, they started working together, sometimes they fought, and then, I think we're seeing the bits and fragments of that history being reconstructed, and here we are today, living together.